Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 25. We've got myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very special guest today, Jason Brown. Jason, what's going on, man?
Good morning, Joe. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciated for the opportunity.
Yeah, man, of course. We were connected through a mutual friend, Luke O'Brien, and I'm going to have to get Luke on the podcast at some point. I don't know how he hasn't been on yet.
He's a good conversation, man. I would definitely play that one on repeat.
I think a good conversation is an understatement. For context, Luke and I got connected through a man named Danny Gewirtz. Danny's a whole nother story. Awesome dude. But he was going to be the videographer for my wife and I's wedding. And then COVID happened and Danny moved to Hawaii. So Luke stepped in last minute. I'm talking weeks notice. And he was like, yeah, man, I'm down. He got to the wedding venue. We shook hands and he just looks at me and he goes, I think we're going to be really good friends.
He's like that, man. You connect. Like his family and my family have been friends for my parents and his parents 40 plus years. And we get our Christmas trees together every year. But, throughout the years, we've kind of linked back up and it's just like, he's a good soul, man. It's just like, he's inspired me and he's helped me to get to the place that I'm at, along with, many other people. But it's awesome to have that mutual. When they're like, oh, he's a friend of a friend, it's like, that's the awesome friend that you want to have.
Yeah. Good people know good people. And I'm grateful to be sitting here with a good person. So Jason, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience, kind of give us a background, whatever's important to you, and then we'll kind of jump in from there.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, you and I met, through Luke, which is, he's helped me tremendously over especially the last couple of years of getting to where I'm at. I am a food stylist and private chef. I've been in the culinary world for over 20 years. It's pretty much been my only, career path. When I was in high school, I went from, washing dishes to bussing tables. And then after high school, I went to Johnson & Wales University to study food and beverage management. And I fell in love with the industry. It was like being in a band with knives and hot pans and, some really interesting people. And, I looked at that, I was like, oh, cool. You could you could travel the world through food. My biggest inspiration was my grandmother. Even when I was little, before even doing it for money, my grandmother, the most amazing cook. Going to her house in Rhode Island for the summer, and different holidays, everything was just like a huge spread. Just amazing, simple dishes, but I remember just like all of us being together around the table, and there was no hats at the table. I mean, I got my hat right now, but if we were sitting down eating you take your hat off at the table. So, it's just like those memories, the warmth, of, people coming together, through food. And, it was amazing. So I wanted to make that, a career path. I came back to Westchester, where I'm from, and Westchester, Pennsylvania, where I'm from. And I just kind of stumbled upon this restaurant in town, and I needed a job. And the chef, amazing chef, Dave Waltai, from Chester County, he took me under his wing, and he's like, look, I'm going to teach you how to cook, because I kind of weaseled my way in there. He's like, oh, you went to Johnson Wales, you're a chef. Yeah. And then he asked me to make something. I was like, nah, dude, I did the management part, accountings, different things like that. So, I fell in love with cooking, and it was amazing. Like, I was like, I want to go on Hell's Kitchen and travel the world and and, kind of the glitz and the glam, but not necessarily wanted to put in, the hard work. And When I was 26, my son Dominic was born, and that kind of, you know, turned my world around, just because I was at a point where I could barely take care of myself, and was living this, rock and roll lifestyle of, work, party, go out, get a couple winks, and do it all over again. And it was just like, as a single guy, like, with no responsibilities, I mean, yeah, it's pretty all right lifestyle. But, now having a child to, take care of, and, be there for, that lifestyle is just not conducive to, a healthy relationship, not only with, your family, his mother, for him, and it took me a long while to kind of break that cycle, because in that industry, it is very easy to get wrapped up into the chaos, and I just kind of left where I thought, when I was raising him and he was with me on my time, I'm good to go. But then after that, it was kind of balls to the wall, like, all right, let's make up for lost time, and, just acting, recklessly. So,
Now, Jason, before we get too far into your story, because I do want to ask a question that I think will lead us down a path pretty deep into all of that. I want to ask a selfish question. Now, because you're a cook, right? My grandmother always used to cook something, and she'd say, "You know what the special ingredient is? Do you know why this is so good?" And I'd say, "No," and she'd say, "Because I made it with love."
yeah,
Right? And so, so you should.
food is love, man.
Yeah.
There is, like, that is a bold fact,
So let me ask you this question. Outside of love, right? Because as someone who can make a really good peanut butter sandwich, I'm talking just straight peanut butter on white bread, no jelly.
crunchy or just smooth.
I like to mix it up, to be honest. So I'm a
Right.
kind of a 50-50 guy. But my question is a serious one. Outside of love, what is one tip that maybe you can give anybody listening, myself included, to make really any food better? Like, what is one just general tip that someone can do to make anything taste a little bit better? It's asking a lot, I know.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, it's one of those things where, like, the sprinkle of love, is one of those where you're just like, oh, yeah, that's what it is. You got to throw some fun, in there. It's kind of one of those. It's like, a sprinkle of fun, a dash of patience, a little drizzle of creativity, and but it's kind of like passion. I think that's the biggest thing too, is, being passionate about it, like, and really, anything. I think it makes something better, whether it tastes better, sounds better, feels better, looks better, is when you have that passion. And I know, for me, like, if you're having, like at work, or you can be uninspired, there's days where you're just like, man, I am just not feeling it, whether it's stuff going on at home, or at the workplace, or the world, I mean, it's easy to get, like, sucked out of your zone, and kind of, veer off onto a different path, for the day. But I think, like, if you're passionate about making it, where, like, look, I'm going to toast this bread. I'm going to get that good peanut butter. I'm going to get some really good jam or preserve, maybe you made it, and I'm going to spread it nice. And, I'm not going to go overboard, because nobody likes that peanut butter jelly where it's like gloppy, too much, seeping out. You know what I mean? Like, less is more sometimes.
I
But,
love it.
like, and like, even with anything, it's just having kind of, like, the time and the desire to put your best foot forward, or whatever. So, I mean, it kind of sounds silly, but I think that's the biggest thing, is the passion, where, like, I look at it like mowing the lawn when I was younger, right? Like, I would get it, and I'd go around the edge, and it was just like, there were certain times where I crushed that lawn, and it looked beautiful. My dad would come home, he's like, damn, that shit looks good. And there was other times where I'm trying to buzz through it so I can go skateboarding, and he would come home, and then I would come home afterwards and I'd see him on the tractor, like, doing it over again. He's like, yo, what's good, man? Like, you did it really well the other day, and you half-assed it this time. And I was like,
Yeah.
wow.
Passion,
I
passion
wasn't
in,
really passionate about that
yeah.
lawn that day.
It means a lot, man. And so next time I make my sandwich, that's what I'm going for. But, on a serious note, and I think this is where we can really dive into your story. And I know it's a deep one. There's a lot to unpack, but the question is, what is the hardest thing or circumstance that you've ever had to handle or work through in life?
I To be honest, I thought it was going to be, um, raising a child. A quick little background is, my son Dominic, he's going to be 13, in August, which is crazy. I was looking at the calendar and I'm like, oh, wow, like I'm going to have a teenager this year, and it's absolutely nuts. And to see how fast that time has gone by.
Mm.
His mom and I, we've never been together, but we've co-parented for 12 and a half years, and she has an amazing husband. Dom is blessed to have an amazing stepfather. And we're in a really good spot. You know what I mean? We could do a whole podcast on that of like, co-parenting, because who knows? It could have been kind of disastrous just because, you're not together, you're not married. Society says you have to do X, Y, and Z. But we've done a really good job. And I think that was just kind of the main focus, was putting him first and being like, look, you put egos aside, and, here we are. And, today I dropped him off to school. He's trying out for the 7th grade baseball team. So good luck, Dommy boy, on that. But, I thought that that's what it was going to be. And now looking back, I'm like, raising a kid, that's peanuts, compared to, I guess, in the big picture is getting my shit together. That was the biggest obstacle that I've had to, overcome. And that's, life, family, relationships, work. But I think the hardest obstacle I've had to overcome was steering down, the right path, and just leaving that life of destruction, because that's where I was heading, and where I was in my party days for years. And I don't want to say necessarily maliciously hurting anybody, but more so myself and my future. So it kind of you have to ultimately hit rock bottom to get back. And I think rock bottom is different for a lot of people. You know what I mean? Because you could be in the mega mansion with the cars and the jewelry and the, vacations and the expensive house and everything, right? But I think people look at rock bottom like, you're in a dark alley and you're homeless, and you're freezing under like a cardboard blanket, and that's not necessarily the case for everyone. You know what I mean? It can be like invisible, and for me, I think that's what it was for a long time, just kind of hiding from this life of just kind of like depression, but using like drugs and alcohol to mask those feelings. And I run, and that's how we met. But for years I was always running from something, you know what I mean? And I find it kind of interesting to see how I run physically now, but for years was always just running to the quick escape. It was a Band-Aid. I used drugs and alcohol to just throw on a temporary aid to kind of help soothe whatever I was going on, as opposed to addressing the situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there's There's a lot that resonates with me, and I've been reading this book called The Everyday Hero Manifesto by Robin Sharma. And
Uh-huh.
there's a quote that I want to read to you and then ask a follow-up question. And the quote is about taking personal responsibility. So he said, taking absolute personal responsibility over our actions and the consequences that flow from them demands that you wage war against your dragons and do battle with your demons. This requires extreme courage and profound wisdom, which few are willing to develop. And it sounds like you got to the place in life, your rock bottom, where you realize that, hey, listen, I can keep doing this, or I can stare down my demons and battle my dragons and take responsibility for everything that I have been avoiding. And so I'm curious for you, Jason, what it looked like leading up to rock bottom, what your rock bottom looked like, felt like, and then what was the moment or time period where you realized like, hey, I want to turn this around and I need to turn this around?
Yeah, absolutely. I again for years just kind of being in the hospitality industry, whether it was a restaurant or catering or I was able to do my job um, without having to be 100% there. And when I say that, meaning like I could go out, get absolutely destroyed the night before, wake up, put on the face, and be good to go. In my mind, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so hungover. Like, I feel like garbage. I just want to, and you make it through the day. And I did that, for years. I think towards like after Dom was born, I landed a catering job, which was amazing. And it was Monday through Friday, which is unheard of in like the, hospitality field. And the hours were from 6 to 3. So I was up, out the door, 6 a.m. I mean, I put in almost a full day by noon. And I learned a boatload, but the guys that I worked with, they were all chefs from restaurants, amazing group of dudes. But they also had families, right? So they held me accountable and they're like, look, go party on the weekend, but you are not coming in here dragging ass because that's not how we roll. I had to be in front of people and it was good to go. And I that gave me structure. The owner of the company did not like me whatsoever. And it was interesting because I was just like, dude, why do you have to take out like all your frustration out on me? Like, my bad, nobody laughed at your jokes and they like me instead, right? So it came to a point where he was like done with me, and I got let go of that job. And I remember I was just like, man, this sucks, because it was so structured and I was good to go. And I felt like I really did have a great future. Like, I probably still would have been there to this day. And instead of taking that as, a kick in the ass and being like, all right, I'm going to show him and I'm going to be the man, I just kind of like, that was like the start of like a little bit of spiraling out of control, because I went to another company where I didn't have to be on point, like until I needed to be, whether it was a party or something like that. So I could roll in, do my job, hungover, whatever, and it was all good because I did not have the structure. Attitude is a reflection of leadership, right? And theirs was kind of like, whatever, we'll get it done and blah, blah, blah. Like, it just wasn't, ruled with an iron fist, which the other place was, which for me was the structure that I needed, right? So for the next like couple years, it was just kind of like that, just doing it, and I think, not that this was the factor, because I was always partying and kind of like just not being as careful as I should have. But like 2014, my grandmother got sick and she passed in November or October of 2014. And that, like, I remember just not being, in a good spot. And it really just like, I was like, geez, man, this is like, this sucks. And she held me, accountable too, because they lived in Rhode Island, but we saw them all the time. And she could tell. She could always like look and be like, what's up with you? You know what I mean? Like, you eating? What are you partying? You out like last night? You know what I mean? So like she could look through my soul, and I'm like, nah, no, I'm good. But she knew. And there was this, again, this is 2014. So, when I would go out, even though it was like a mile down the street, I would drive home, and it was being extremely reckless. Uber was just coming out on the scene. And, for me, it's like you have the ability to just go on your phone and get a ride that somebody could take you home. But no, I'm like, I'm good. And it was just putting myself in these like really reckless situations. And towards the winter of 2014 and then falling into 2015, I was just like, I was miserable at work. Things weren't necessarily good, like, at home. It just was, I was like really, going nowhere. Like I wasn't being, a creative chef. I think also too, this was, social media wasn't what it was. You had your Facebook, but like Instagram was kind of just, you posted a picture, you filtered it and you put it up. Like you didn't use it as a brand building tool. And I just was not maximizing my potential. And so 2015, just partying way too much, way too often. And I was doing that to like mask that like depression and anxiety. All my friends were in relationships, getting married. Some were like starting families. And I'm like, am I just going to be that guy, good for a laugh at the party? And, how, messed up can he get this weekend? And it was just getting, it was as opposed to like being able to joke around, it was becoming the joke. Like, and then the joke just started getting like severe, where it wasn't even funny anymore. It was like, okay, you got to pump the brakes because some serious shit is about to happen. And I was just kind of just like ticking up that, on the roller coaster where it was like, and, and I'm like not buckled in. That's the thing. Like you're on that, crazy, Incredible Hulk roller coaster that's got loops and twists and all this. And I'm just like, yay. Like, and they're like, sit down, you got to put the strap on. I'm like, whatever, I'll hold on to the sides. I'll be fine. And that's what it was. It was like, okay, cool. Like when you're at the, if you've ever been to one of those bars, I think they have it in Xfinity where it's the mechanical bull and they start it and they're like, do, and you're like, yeah, I got this. And then all of a sudden the dude on the machine is just like, watch this. And that's what it was. That was God and my grandmother in heaven. They were sitting there and my grandmother was looking down. She's like, what is he doing? And God's like, he's been doing this for years. And she's like, no, that not my grandson. And he's like, let me tell you something. I've been watching this forever. Like, what do you want me to do? And she's like, please, you have to fix this, And he's like, all right. And like, this is what I've replayed in my head numerous times because I know for a fact that was the situation where they were, my grandmother could have been, making cookies and God's like, I'll take another oatmeal raisin, but you got to come over here and look at what Jay's, doing. She comes over and she's like, holy shit, what? No. You got to flip his world, upside down. And that's what it was. March 1st, 2015, is when that roller coaster looped, swooped 100 million miles an hour. And your boy was not strapped in and he was, fortunately, I landed alive, but that was when my world was, flipped upside down. And I look at it before, and I've said this, numerous times, where that was looking at it where you're like waking up in a a jail cell, and you're like, okay, this is the worst day of my life. And now looking back, even having this conversation with you, it's like, that was the best day of my life, because that started a whole new life. You know, at the time, you're like, oh, wow, I'm in this concrete block with no clue how I got here. And what am I going to do? You know, and the first thought is like, your world's over. You know what I mean? But after that, it was literally like hour by hour, day by day, there was little signs and hope that things were going to get better. But that took some real soul searching. You know, that's where my faith also too was like restored, because I was always asking God for something, you know, and my mom always told me, she's like, you know, and a lot of people, they're always, dear Lord, get me out of this. Let me pass this test. Let me drop this weight. Let me, you know, pass this drug test. You know what I mean? As opposed to being like, dear Lord, thank you for this career opportunity. Thank you for my healthy family. Thank you for, you know, my parent beating cancer, or, you know, whatever the case may be. He gets annoyed by you always asking something and not thanking, you know, just as anybody else. Right. And that's what it was. It was always like, please let me get out of this. Please let me not go to jail. Please let me not lose my license. Instead of like, thank you, God, for giving me another opportunity to make this right, you know? So.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing all of that. Second of all, I think there's a J.K. Rowling quote that says, rock bottom became a solid foundation in which I rebuilt my life. And it sounds like you look back now and you realize that that day, March 1st, 2015, while it sounded or felt like the worst day of your life at the time, has become this point where you've rebounded, so to speak, and just changed things completely. And it's really cool for you to be sitting here just over 7 years after that, in a place where you're at, able to articulate this journey, which I'm sure while you were on the journey itself, and you still are on the journey, but it just doesn't always make sense when it's happening. And it's really awesome to be able to look back and connect the dots. And I guess, Jason, the next question just flows naturally is, right, that was something that you didn't necessarily choose, right? Yes, you made a bunch of decisions that led you to that rock bottom, but you were in it, right? And that was happening and you had to deal with it. And the next question is like, you dealt with that hard thing. What is the hardest thing in your life that you've done on purpose? And why have you done that thing?
I think the hardest, and I love that question because, you know, I love the Hard Things Club, to just throw that out there too. You know what I mean? Like I look at it, and I think a hard thing to do, and I'll get back to the question, but I just want to say this to you. I think a hard thing to do is to stay focused on the hard things that you put out. Right. And, you know, with like the journaling and stuff like that, I had a couple things down, and then I, you know, I lost, you know, track of the days. And then it was, I did do the outside in February, which was great. And it was funny because my girlfriend, she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I got to go outside for 15 minutes. And she's like, I think he means like during the sunlight. And I'm like, no, babe, it's 15 minutes outside, like, so you can freeze your ass off. Right. And she's like, yeah, okay. So there would be times where I literally, you know, it was like 11:30 at night. I'm like, oh crap, I gotta get out there, right? And I just would, you know, I'd go for a walk around the neighborhood and set the timer and be like, wow, cool, you know, I got it done, and I felt good about that, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I do love the hard things on purpose mentality, right? And I think one of the hardest things that I've done on purpose is being transparent of what I've been through, and transparency and being open from my past. When I, you know, as of the last couple years, I definitely kept it kind of tight. You know, certain people knew the severity of certain situations, and it was almost like kind of masking it. But in the grand scheme of things, like masking that does not help anyone, you know, because if somebody doesn't see the severity of, March 1st, 2015, getting arrested in 2 different states in one day, that's not, that's not great. You know what I mean? And not being completely transparent with that doesn't allow me to be able to show or inspire other people going through it. Because, if I'm just like, well, I got a DUI. Okay, cool. So many people get a DUI, they lose their license, they're back on whatever. They might continue, down that path. But when you're like arrested with drugs at the night in New Jersey, and then you get out, and then the following day you're driving home back to Pennsylvania, like, holy shit, my life is coming to an end, or I've got to find a lawyer to figure this out to go back to court. And then you get a DUI because you're so tuned up from the night before still, that's like a thing, you know what I mean? And instead of kind of sugarcoating it and kind of being like, no, it was fine and blah, 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 to being like completely open and transparent, I think that's the hardest thing that I've had to do, thus far, because that is one of the main reasons why I have not continued to be embarrassed or ashamed of my past, because I want to inspire others. You know what I mean? And I think that's why you and I have made the connection, for this awesome, relationship. And it's because you want to do the same as well. And, I don't think, you look at, I always look up to like Robert Downey Jr., right? I mean, that is, a crazy story where like there was no sugarcoating. I mean, you see these videos of like him in and out of jail and, living this lifestyle, and has, had the whole world to lose. And, to see him now, I mean, he's Iron Man. Like that's the top tier right there. And I think that, again, like that was the hardest thing that I have to do on purpose, where instead of being ashamed or embarrassed of the past, it's like, okay, cool, I'm gonna be like full transparency, let it out. It's therapeutic for me, to talk about it. Is it something that I want to discuss like every single day? Not necessarily, but it almost is. Something will pop up on a day-to-day that kind of reminds. Like I got a tattoo of the date. It was 3/1 15, and it's right on my wrist. It's at the bottom. And it was funny because like when I got my sleeve, I left this like little space because it was like, oh, well, maybe I might need, to cover it up with a shirt, for work and stuff. And it's nice that I left that spot because I was able to get that as like a reminder. And, it's a perfect little, I look at it every day and I'm just like, yeah, the reason why you're here is because of that day. But I think, most importantly, coming back to, what was the hardest thing was, again, just being open and honest and stuff like that. Like, again, my son is going to be 13 this year. Like that is the age where, certain activity and temptation and peer pressure and things like that. And, I refuse to have him not, be aware of, the dangers of the world that, like, I don't want my demons coming after him. You know what I mean? And that's definitely something that worries me, where it's just like, I don't want those to pass down to him, because, him and I have very similar characteristics, personalities and stuff. Like you want to be the, the highlight of the party and stuff like that, where I want to make sure that he knows the severity of his actions. And that was the thing also too, I never kind of appreciated or took in consideration of how severe the consequences can be of your actions. You know what I mean? Direct or indirect. To not only yourself, but your family, your kids, your friends. So that was the biggest thing as of, the last couple of years, having to dive into that. And I think it's been the most rewarding too. because I've had people reach out, whether it was coworkers or friends or just random people that, you know, you're friends with on, you know, Facebook or Instagram, and, you know, you've been connected, but you're not necessarily on a day-to-day relationship. And for somebody to have the strength to reach out to someone like myself and be like, hey, I'm going through it. What did you do? You know, because I think there's so many different approaches. I think that there is, I guess, this misconception of like, if you have a drinking problem or a drug problem, you have to go to AA, NA, you have to declare that you're, you know, no good. I'm an alcoholic, I'm a drug addict, and that's you for the rest of your life. And I remember going to AA, this was twice, and it was more like court ordered because I had to get my signatures and stuff like that for the probation officer. And, you know, I remember going in the second time, and this guy came up, he's like, oh, I haven't seen you, you know, how's everything going? And I was like, dude, I'll be honest with you, like, I don't like coming here. And he's like, well, what's the reason? I said, well, because it's a constant reminder of that day. And he's like, oh, well, you know, I need that. And I'm all about whatever works for that certain person. For me, going in and being like, hi, I'm Jason, I'm an alcoholic, that wasn't what I wanted to declare. Like, I wanted to be like, hi, I'm Jason, and I screwed up really, really bad, and I will do whatever it takes to make it better. And that's kind of where, you know, my path. And, you know, again, faith, like, definitely was restored, and, you know, the power of God and prayer and family and support, that's definitely what helped me through on a day-to-day. But when there's certain things that get into my head, they just kind of like lock in. And I knew by giving up, you know, drugs and alcohol, I was going to be in a better spot. But there was no half-assing, you know, the 0 to 100 mentality was always there, whether it was, you know, drinking and partying, like, all right, cool, you know, bottles of champagne and drugs and all this jazz, like, that was that. But I knew I couldn't just, you know, kind of put your toe in, you know, the sobriety pool, I guess you could say, by just being like, oh, I'll see how the water is. Like, you have to, for me, you got to kind of just like dive right in. And that's what I had to do. And kind of, you know, not look back, just because I remember, you know, my son's mom at the start, when I was kind of going through my whole situation of figuring out like legal ramifications of what's going to happen, you know, will I do jail time? How long will I lose my license? Like, am I going to be fired? Like, you know, so many things. And, you know, she pretty much said was like, look, if you want to continue down this path, whatever, but I can't have you live in that lifestyle and then you wanting to be, you know, around your son by yourself, you know, and rightfully so. And it was those words that really kind of resonated, where I'm like, wow, she's telling me if I do not get my shit together, then you do not see your son, you know. And I was not going to let any substance prevent me from, you know, interacting with him, loving him, being with him, having, you know, a supervisor, you know, watch me loving, you know, my child. So that was, you know, a huge hit, where you're like, damn, like, she's not messing around, and had every single right to, you know, because I wouldn't, if I was in the same situation, be like, no, you know, I do not feel comfortable with, you know, you living that reckless life and then trying to, you know, take care of your kid. Like, no, it just doesn't work like that. You know what I mean? Like, you need to do, being a parent is also a privilege, you know, it's not necessarily a right, where if you want the job and the responsibility, you got to act accordingly as well.
Man, Jason, I'm so grateful for you and for you sharing your story, and just to go back to the concept of you overcoming the barriers to actually just be transparent and honest and share your story. I mean, that's what this podcast is all about. I want people out there to know that no matter what they're going through, that there are other people out there who, one, have been through something similar or even different, but experienced the same internal struggle, dialogue, emotions, challenges, and overcame them, or are still in the process of overcoming them and are willing to share that. And I think the perfect example was a couple months ago. You and I were at a Lululemon event in the store before it opened. There were only a handful of people there. You and I were having a conversation. I don't know if you remember this, but there was another man who was there, and he kind of, was in the area, and he kind of came into made a little trio, and we were talking. And I forget what it was that we were actually maybe talking about, you coming on the podcast, and he overheard something, and he was also overcoming an addiction. He was maybe 5, 6, 7 years sober. And you two started that dialogue back and forth. And I just was able to step back and watch you two, in a way, bond over the fact that you had been through something so similar. And I think one of my fears is that there are people who are standing next to each other in life, sitting down at the same table, sharing the same space, who are both struggling with something or have struggled with something deep down inside, but neither person is brave enough to open up about it. And both people think that they're alone. And I think what you're doing is so brave and so important because it lets other people know that they're not alone. And so I want to thank you for that. And I think it also creates a domino effect, right? Someone else might hear your story, and it might not happen today or tomorrow or next week, but eventually they might also build up the courage to share their story, to reach out to somebody and let another person know that they're not alone. And I think that's really important because at our core, we're just all people dealing with some really hard stuff because life's not easy. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
no, and I totally agree. And I remember that conversation that we had, and I loved how, that guy was super transparent because, there's like certain issues and topics like in life that, people get scared of. Like I think sobriety
mhm,
is one of them. I think faith as
mhm,
well is a big thing. Um, people can be like, oh, he's a Bible thumper. Da, da, da. It's just like, nah, here's my deal is I'm like witness
yeah,
of the hand of God of helping me. You know what I mean? And I think especially, now, like I always joke around, I'm like, man, this world needs a little bit more Jesus, right? Like, or whatever, whether if you're, Muslim or Hindu or Jewish, like whatever the case may be, right? It's more of just that like sense of faith and believing, in something because, um, these figures that we have that we put on a pedestal, like they're like, oh, this person's going to save us. This person's no, they're not. There's people that could potentially help and aid,
mhm,
but the big man upstairs is really the one that's like kind of being like, you guys are all silly. I just watch how you guys try to all figure it out and put this person and this person and this person. It's like, just let me take control of what's going on and restore that. But
mhm,
you're right. Like, and that was the cool part about that conversation with him and I, was that we were both like, he was telling the thing, and it was as if we were talking about the Phillies spring training. You know what I mean? Like he was just X, Y, and Z. But like listening to his story after, I was like, damn, like that's intense. Like it was a lot. And I was like,
mhm,
maybe I wouldn't have been able to handle that situation,
mm,
what he went through, and there's always someone that's, not going to top it, but there's always somebody going to have a story that's different
yeah,
and could, might look like, I don't want to say worse,
mhm,
but maybe not as manageable as yours. Right. So like, if I'm telling a story and, then you hear another one where like somebody's like, hey, hold my coffee for a second. Let me tell you something. It kind of makes you think. We're like, wow, I really didn't have it that bad.
mhm,
And then you give it up to them for having more strength than, because it's like, wow, would I've been able to, overcome that and, in certain situations. So, but yeah, I definitely appreciate when people are able to, kind of let it out because
mhm,
like the past is the past,
yeah,
like when you're moving forward, And that's what I was always scared of, especially with, work and kind of career opportunities, but also like, relationships, whether it's your family, your friends, significant others, of judging of like, well, we're going out to a restaurant and it's a wine bar, or, we want to go to the club, but we want to invite Jay and, we don't know. And that's greatly appreciated. You know what I mean? Like for me, I feel like I'm very blessed in the sense of I can do those things that I used to do because I enjoyed them regularly, whether even not having to, consume drugs or alcohol, right? Going out to dinner. I appreciate like the craftsmanship, if a bartender is making a great drink for my friend, like I look at it not as like, oh man, they're going to get tossed up by that martini. Like, damn, there was like smoke and a twisty cucumber. And, how could I do that? Like make it like a mocktail or something, just because people in that industry, they work their tails off and it's fun to watch. Right. And that was one of the toughest thing about the last couple of years is that, camaraderie in that scene was shut down, where everybody's able to just kind of, engage in conversation, have some good eat, a little good drink, whatever the case may be. So, I don't know. I forgot I don't know how I kind of spun off on that, but yeah, it's interesting to see like there's certain topics that are kind of like, taboo in life, and I don't want them, to be taboo. And I follow this Facebook page. It's called Sober is Cool, which is really fun. And I put it in a post, not my original words, but it was like, it says, there was two things that I really found amazing. It was, be the reason why somebody thinks that recovery is possible, right? And that really hit home, because there's other people in my life that I look up to and I'm like, damn, it is possible. I have a guy at work, 25 plus years, and been through it all. And like, he makes me look like little time, and he is one of the reasons where I look, I'm like, okay, cool. Like that's 25 years right there. And it's amazing. He tells me every single day, him and I talk, and not necessarily will he tell me the things I want to hear, but what I need to hear. And I'll go back and I'm like, you were right. And, like, thank you for our conversation. And, he looks at me and he's just like, to be young and naive about the world. You know what I mean? And it's great. I think everybody needs that, right? Like a mentor, a father, an older brother figure, whatever the case may be. And I'm extremely grateful for him. And, it's, now I'm like losing my train of thought again, but
it's all good, man. I was going to say, you made me think of something that I come back to often, and it's just that hard is relative. And so I think you're right. It's easy in the world of social media, especially, to compare ourselves to other people, especially to compare our hardships and our struggles and our adversity. And that's not the best thing to do. And that's probably not even the right thing to do ever, because it's all relative. Hard for you is hard for you. Hard for me is hard for me. And hard is hard. But at the same time, like, we sometimes don't know how strong we can be until we're forced to be strong. Right. And so you and I could look at someone else's situation and say, man, I don't think I can handle that. But if we were put in that situation, we would find a way. Right. As would anybody listening to this podcast. And that's what it is to be human. Is we are resilient, we're adaptable, we're strong. And sometimes we just need a reason. And so with that, we talked a lot about hard things. We talked a lot about strength. This podcast is obviously called the Project Endure podcast. So question for you, Jason, as someone who's ran marathons, what does the word endurance mean to you?
I think endurance is, which I love what you're doing on the Project Endure. It's like, it's something that inspires me, daily, just to see. And, whether I'm like, the best part about it too is like when I scroll and, I see either your, feed come up or the Project Endure, it's that breath of fresh air where it's just like, damn, man, those are the words that I need to hear. Like, and you would love to, have more of that, right? It's like, now you scroll and it's just like this side and that side and blah, 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 and this and that. And it's just like, no, just give me some uplifting, words of advice. And I always I'm like, all right, I need my morning cup of Joe. You know what I mean? And it's and it's great. It's inspiring. Endure, it's kind of like just going through the shit, right? Like day in and day out. And if you're able to put your feet up at the end of the day, like you've endured it, and it's interesting to see the last, I ran 2 marathons, Philadelphia in 2019, New York in 2021. 2019, I felt like I was in great physical shape, for myself, right? And I was there physically, I was able to endure, the marathon, and it was great. Extremely happy with the time. I used to smoke cigarettes back in the day. Never in my entire life did I think that I would be able to run 26.2 miles and enjoy it. Right. I was trotting around the track back in high school, barely making, a mile. And then in 2021, my training wasn't as diligent as it was. And I felt like because I just would go out and run, I could do it all over again. New York City kicked my ass physically, and I was able to endure it mentally, but physically I was just I wasn't, as strong. And, but it was, again, kind of, when you say, how do you feel about, endure? It's it's going through the shit, and making it to the other side or the finish line, so to speak, and mentally I was able to do it. It crushed the ego. Philly, I ran the whole thing. New York, I got to a point where, I went out too hot, and I just wasn't there because I couldn't endure it physically, right? Mentally, I was there. I was still, trying to move my little pistons and get them, through Brooklyn and Queens. And it was just all right, dude, if you're going to endure this physically and emotionally, and mentally, we got to pace ourselves. We got to walk a little bit. I remember a couple random guys, doing the thermo gun or whatever, and I had to, pause for a minute. I'm eating oranges and snacks that they're giving out on the side just to kind of, get through it. But, yeah, I mean, just to kind of go back to, I was I got to get through this shit, and that's for me is, when I kind of jokingly play it in my head, I'm when it's Project Endure, it's Project Get Through that shit. Whether it's physically, emotionally, mentally, it's getting through it. However you can do that.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better myself. And it's funny just hearing now at this point 25 different definitions from 25 different people. The one common theme is that there's just this constant forward motion, even if it's not necessarily physical, right? You can stop and take a rest break. You can put your hands on your knees. You can catch your breath. But in your mind, you're always thinking about how do I keep going forward and cutting through all of this that's right in front of me, whether it's a marathon, whether you're crawling somewhere, whether you're working toward a degree somewhere or a professional goal, right? It could be anything, but I think endurance is that ever forward mental attitude toward life. And it's cool to see it play out in yours, Jason. And so as we kind of begin to land this plane, I want to ask the final question. And this one's a really special one to me because I've listened to podcasts before that have changed my life. I have watched YouTube videos, speeches, read books that have changed the way that I see the world entirely. And I think all it takes sometimes is the right sentence or the right phrasing at the right time for the right person. And so if someone's listening to this podcast on the other end of the speaker right now, and they're going through some really, really tough stuff, maybe they chose to do it or maybe they didn't. And you were to speak directly to that person right now, what advice or guidance or encouragement would you have for the person listening to the podcast right now?
I would just 100% have to say, and I've said this, before, is that, and this is easier said than done, but do not ever lose hope. There is always hope. Hone in on your faith, whether it's spiritual, religious, family, friends, and just know that there are better days ahead of you, right? But also know that you have to put in the work. You know, for years, I've always wanted the championship parade, but never wanted to put in the work, right? I tell my son this all the time, and I need to practice what I preach as well, where, you know, you want the parade, right? But you don't want to put in the Kobe Mamba mentality attitude, right? When he got eliminated from the playoffs, you know, his rookie year, he didn't go sulk, you know, and go to his home and, oh, woe is me. Dude got off the plane and he was shooting free throws at the high school gym, you know, and you look at that from a perspective of watching him grow, you know, and, you know, I look at, there's certain players like a Tom Brady, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, watching him through his career, whatever, they're always winning, da da da. You don't like them, but as they get older and like towards the end of their career,
Mm-hmm.
and this is a big thing with like Kobe Bryant, I look at them like the reason why they have everything that they do is because they never lost hope and they put in the work. You know, people are always like, oh, this person's lucky, that person's lucky. There is no luck. Luck is when hard work and dedication meets opportunity, you know, and that's just like, you know, the biggest thing, you know, for me is with a hope and a prayer, anything is possible.
Mm.
And again, I say this easier said than done. And that's one of the biggest things too, where I saw this quote on the sobriety page where when we recover loudly, people don't have to die silently. And you know, again, that's the biggest thing for me is that if someone can see or hear the story, you know, and can be inspired and be able to, you know, kind of get up and move forward. You know, I don't have it all figured out. I wish I did. There are a million things that I would love to work on and be better. You know, I joke around with one of my coworkers and I'm like, how can we be so great at what we do, you know, on a professional level, but on other ends, you know, we lack, you know what I mean? Certain aspects of my life. I'm like, man, I really wish I could take, you know, that and use it in different areas of my life. So, you know, those are things that, you know, I always have to continuously, you know, work on. And again, just saying it to you on this podcast and stuff like that, it's therapeutic for myself where it's just like, okay, well, you know, you put all this out into the universe, but you also need to, you know, use some of this in your day to day, maybe not necessarily your career or, you know, your sobriety or, you know, recovery and stuff like that, but also use it in different aspects of your life, whether it's, you know, family, relationships, and really, you know, go hard in the paint on those ends too,
Yeah.
you know? So, but yeah, that's the biggest thing is hope and faith, you know, keeping those two right in front of you and just knowing that, you know, there's always light at the end of the tunnel, regardless of how dark it is, it's shining. You just need to, it could be just one more step forward and you're like, oh, damn, boom, there's that little peak of light. So,
Yeah.
and it's just, you know, again, I want the fame, my own TV show, cooking, flipping eggs with Joe Rinaldi. You know what I mean? Whether they're on the floor or not, who cares, right? It's it's all there, but I look at it and I'm like, if I am able to obtain that, yes, that's an amazing goal, right?
Yeah.
But I need to obtain that to then get to the bigger, you know, task at hand and the more meaningful goal, which is to be at you know, a platform to inspire and let
Mm-hmm.
people know like, hey, this dude, you know, went through it and
Yeah.
he's able to, you know, be here, you know, and always continuously still working on being better,
Right.
career, family. You know, I would love to be a better Jason Brown, right? For everyone, and I think that's you know, kind of a new goal after just talking about about that, like a new project indoor. Like, how can I be a better Jason Brown? And so that is a project that, will continue for a lifetime. You know what I mean? And to be able to endure that would be great success. So,
Dude, man, just so that those words are so special to me. And I would also say that for me, people listening to this podcast know that faith and hope are a big part of my story. And I think, regardless of what bigger power anybody listening to this believes in, God can move mountains, but don't forget to bring a shovel. I wish I
yeah,
came up with that, right? I don't know where I heard that, but not me. But right, exactly. Hope
absolutely.
creates an
Yeah.
opportunity to work hard.
Yeah, it's my mom told me this one time, which it's kind of to leave off on this one is God gives everyone a gift, and what you do with that gift is your gift back to him.
Oh,
And he's blessed me with so many things, and I'm just trying to continuously repay that gift, that second chance, that other opportunity that him and my grandmother came up with some years back, and it was just it's amazing. But I want to make sure that gift back to him is just as amazing what he gave me.
yeah, that's beautiful. And you're doing an awesome job, Jason. And if people want to connect with you because your story resonated, or they just want to learn more about cooking, or whatever it is, they want to connect with you, where's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, if you want to, I'm Jason Brown on Facebook. It's at chef_J Dish on Instagram. By all means, anybody ever wanted some food styling or some creative menu ideas. My whole goal is to be able to show people how to cook restaurant quality food in the comfort of their own home, right? Take all the anxiety and stress out of cooking and just make it fun, and by all means. But if you were going through it, you're having a day, or you're looking to make a change, in your lifestyle, shoot me a message, let's vibe, grab a coffee. Like, that's the biggest thing, where we can just kind of, relate and be like, hey, this worked for me. Hopefully it can work for you. But, just bringing people together, through food, couple laughs, you know what I mean? That's what I'm all about. So by all means, reach out. Once I figure out TikTok, it's lights out for everybody. You know what I mean? So I'm going to compile 5 years worth of like little random videos, and I'll finally figure it out. So my son's got me. He's like, Dad, you just got to figure this out. Okay. So, yeah,
Yeah.
anybody wants to hit me up, give me a shout, and we'll vibe over some good eats.
Well, I am in the same TikTok boat. We will both figure it out. And Jason, man, just thank you so much for sharing your story. We appreciate it so much.
Joe, absolutely. Thank you so very much. It's a blessing that we met, we connected, we have this amazing relationship, and I'm just glad to be a part of the Project Endure.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Endure podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Endure Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.